everyone, it is day 2 of 30 essays in 30 days, at least I hope, and we are continuing on. Basically what I'm doing in this series is I've taken all of the different issue essay prompts that are available on the ETS website and I've put it into an Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to do a little bit of analysis on, and I will have all of that info on what kinds of topics and themes are really present in all of those essay prompts in a different video. But for now, what I'm going to do is randomly select a prompt that I will work through from question to actual full essay and passage live. And remember, I did get a 5 and a 6 on my 2 essays that I took on my actual personal GRE. And since then, I've been working a lot with GRE essays. So I will actually walk you through everything that I see, and you'll be able to see my entire thought process throughout this video. So without further ado, we will jump in. As I mentioned in the previous video, we have a total of 156 prompts. The reason the random number generator goes from 2 to 157 is because of how my Excel graph is set up. But let's figure out 108. If I remember correctly, this is actually the same essay that we looked at last time. But if not, it is not. Okay, so teacher salaries. So I will copy and paste this into a Word document and trying not to read any of the details since I want this to be as authentic as possible. I'm trying to sort of mimic what you would actually see in a full test. So I will also put on a 30-minute timer and I will try to see if I can get it on screen, but if not, you can take a look. This starts right around 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the video. So without further ado, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. So, teacher salaries should be based on their students' academic performance. Write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim. In developing and supporting your position, be sure to address the most compelling reasons and or examples that could be used to challenge your position. So, this is really interesting because we have the general claim here, but it asks us not just to agree or disagree, but to address the most compelling reasons and or examples. So I will highlight that for myself so I make sure that I do address that. So in general, as I have been doing with the previous essays, I will plan for 3 different body paragraphs. So first I want to decide whether I agree or disagree, and I think this is going to be mostly disagree. So remember, the actual stance that you take doesn't really matter. I am going to say mostly disagree because it's difficult, or I would say maybe academic performance is impacted by a lot of different factors, many that are out of a teacher's control. And notice here, I'm not trying to come up with examples. I'm really focusing first on what my main body paragraphs and what those arguments are going to be. So academic performance is impacted by many factors. And I think the second one is it's very difficult to actually measure academic performance. Usually use standardized testing, for example. All right. And then in body 3, I typically reserve this for the concession, and that is going to be the same thing here, particularly because this question asks us specifically to address those. So why should salaries be based on students' academic performance? Well, so it would be good for salaries to be based on performance because, and I would say something like that's the purpose of school, creates usually good incentives for teachers. And then if you have looked at some of my other content on writing concession paragraphs, and I have a full video specifically about that here, you don't just want to say that these are compelling reasons that challenge my position. You want to say that these are compelling reasons, and refute those. So for the purpose of school, you could say, again, the two reasons I've mentioned, but also, school serves other purposes. And I would say a big one is definitely socialization with other students. And then here I'm just going to make it super clear that this is what I'm going to be refuting for the compelling reasons that could challenge my position, and good incentives for teachers, and then it could create perverse incentives, encourages teachers to teach to the test or to help students cheat. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, and as you can see, I've spent almost 5 minutes just brainstorming so far without even thinking about actually writing. And the reason I do that is because once I have a really good idea of what I want to write, actually putting pen to paper or fingers to my keyboard, I guess in this case, actually is way easier. So academic performance is impacted by a lot of factors. So let's say, when I was little, my brother had cancer, and I was unable to focus in class, do homework at home, etc. My grades struggled, but it was no fault of the teacher. So that is a true story, my personal experience when I was in elementary school. But if you don't have a personal experience like that, you can also draw from anything that you've seen on social media or from your friends, or even like Harry Potter, for example. And I'll put this in because I really like to draw from Harry Potter because I think it actually has a lot of information that really fits into different types of prompts. So for Harry Potter, for example, their performance struggled, let's say in their first year because they had to fight the snake. And I apologize to all the die-hard fans, but I don't remember exactly what the details of those are. I read those books years ago, but the idea here is that obviously there are other factors that are influencing academic performance. And then here for body paragraph 2, it's difficult to actually measure academic performance. So typically we use standardized testing, but we also in education has a big debate about, I don't know the technical terms of this, so as you can see, I am struggling, a little bit to sort of come up with my own ideas, but basically like absolute improvement compared to expected knowledge, for example, versus improvement over the year, which is kind of compared to previous year's progress. So really difficult to test that. And another thing that comes to mind for me is for languages, For foreign languages, usually, let me specify that. So foreign languages, difficult to evaluate speaking skills, which are actually usually the most important. So you've taken Spanish for 3 years and you can't speak a single thing. Even though you can answer a bunch of multiple choice questions, it kind of renders that totally useless. So as you can see, I've spent a full 8 minutes writing all of that down, but I'm ready to actually write everything out and put it to paper. So, basically, my introduction is going to be quite simple, stating my position. So, let me look at okay. So, teacher salaries have been a hot debate topic for decades as teachers greatly influence the development of children all around the world. Introducing the topic a bit, I believe I mostly disagree, however, that their salaries should be based on the academic performance of their students for several reasons. And what I like to do is actually write out what those general reasons are, because it gives you a good idea of what to expect for the reader, what to expect when they're actually reading through it, but also for you to ensure you have a good structure. So, firstly, academic performance has many influences, not just a teacher's efforts. Also, performance can be difficult to measure. And then since the prompt is specifically asking me to address the most compelling reasons that could challenge my position, I will add a sentence talking a little bit about that, even though generally I don't recommend that you mention any concessions in your introduction, because you're kind of taking away a little bit from your main argument. Okay, so while salaries can create a good incentive structure for teachers, they often may not work as intended. So I'm keeping it broad, but I'm putting that idea in there. All right, so I have the introduction and I'm ready to talk about my body paragraph. Now, the body paragraphs are the most important, so if you don't have time to write a good introduction, not a big deal, but I do have a video on introductions for issue essays. All right, so as stated, there are many reasons that a student may perform well or not in school. Much of the time, teachers cannot control these factors, even if they try to. For example, when I was in elementary school, my younger brother was diagnosed with leukemia. My parents had to focus on taking him to the hospital and caring for him, and I was focused, and I'm struggling with the language a little bit here, and my attention was primarily devoted to getting myself to and from school on time, since I was really young. I did not have parental supervision to ensure I completed homework or read books outside of class. And because I was so young, I did not complete some big projects I was assigned. My teachers tried to help, but with all the other students in the class, were unable to parent me, so my grades suffered during that time. So as a result, it is clear that sometimes teachers can make a big effort, but their students' performance is still out of their control. So generally, this is a good paragraph, and if you're worried about me or my brother, he's actually perfectly fine and really enjoys annoying me now. But I think this is a really good example because I know it well and I can talk about it quite well. I can tie it very closely to my teacher's effort and them trying to help me out, but because of the situation, just couldn't. So I would usually just leave it there, so I won't write out the Harry Potter example, but it would be something similar to this. I will also say, in addition, academic performance can be very difficult to measure. In the education, I don't want to call it an industry, but a field, there has been extensive debate about how to measure student improvement, whether students should be compared to an expected standard for their grade/age level, or whether their improvement over the course of the year is more important. This has not been solved. Since I use solved, I'm going to add the word problem. Has not been solved, and it is difficult to imagine that a school district could come up with a good compromise that all teachers would be happy with, considering their compensation would be tied to the results. And then I would also say, moreover, there are certain classes that make it difficult to score or measure progress. For example, in elementary school, there are many PE, music, or arts classes that are based mostly on participation. for foreign language classes, for older students, grades are often based on listening and writing skills rather than, or I would say, mostly reading and writing skills. Rather than listening and speaking. Speaking in particular is a much better measure of progress. This can create, so what I'm doing is I'm putting out the argument, the information, the details, and then I want an extra sentence to emphasize the point that I'm trying to make. So academic performance is very difficult to measure. That is the main thesis of this paragraph, and I want to explain how this example I've brought up emphasizes that that argument. So this can create, so I will say in foreign language classes, this is true, but rather than saying that, for foreign language, instead of saying those skills are more important, reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills are often should be measured separately. And usually students are better in some skills than others. So my point is that academic performance is very difficult to measure. So with 4 different types of skills, overall academic performance can be hard to sort of gather together. So hard to summarize. And then so particularly for non-math, non-core classes, why don't we say elective? Elective classes, academic performance can pose a challenge to I don't want to keep saying measure, but I can't think of anything else, so I will write that in. Okay, so my main idea here is academic performance can be very difficult to measure, and I talk about different types of skills, different types of classes, and then I say, this particularly applies to elective classes. And I have about 8.5 minutes left for my third body concession. And what I'm gonna do is, if you brainstorm on your computer, you can actually copy and paste a bit so you can see your notes and bring them back down here as you write. So what you want to do in a concession is admit that they have a point. So in certain situations, it admittedly would be beneficial for both students and teachers for teacher salaries to be based on student performance. Students making academic progress is the is the main goal of school, and usually higher salaries for higher grades usually creates good incentives for teachers to teach more effectively. However, and this is what a lot of people get wrong, is they leave this and then they don't explain why that's not necessarily wrong, but why the point should be more nuanced here. So I've already kind of mentioned it, but however, let's see. So the purpose of school. So however, school also serves other purposes, and teachers can provide other benefits to their students outside of just teaching material. For example, students can learn to socialize with others, and teachers can serve as their mentors, particularly if they are interested in their teacher's specialization. We often hear about how much a teacher has impacted their student, and this is rarely because of the material that they were teaching. Additionally, having salaries tied to student performance could encourage teachers to ignore important skills such as critical thinking or something like that, that are not tested on standardized tests, or to help students cheat. Neither of these situations would be beneficial for students' long-term development. So again, as you can see, I actually spend the bulk of this paragraph talking about why these arguments are not that strong. So here, what I want to do is, if you don't have any time left, you can end your paragraph here. And one thing to note is I wrote a little bit more and actually addressed two different possible concessions here because because the prompt specifically asked me to do that. A lot of times I will only talk about one thing here in the concession paragraph, but if you have a little bit of time, it's great to have a few sentences, 2 or 3 max, just to have a short conclusion. So what I will say is something similar to this. So students learn and grow in school based on their teachers' efforts, but also other factors outside the home, outside the school. I'll change that in a second. Outside the school. Much of their improvement cannot be measured well. While salaries tied to student performance can be helpful, they can also harm students just as much as they help them. As a result, I disagree that salaries should be based on student improvement. in school. I will say specific measures of student improvement in school. All right, so I have about 2 minutes left. You can see that I've written quite a bit, 633 words here, and that's because I'm very comfortable writing. I also type relatively fast, but as you can see, I didn't have to think too much as I started writing because I already had everything down here. I want to take the last 2 minutes to sort of read over particularly my body paragraphs, just to make sure they explain what I want them to explain. So as stated, there are many reasons that a student may perform well or not in school. Much of the time, teachers cannot control these forces even if they try to. For example, when I was in elementary school, my younger brother was diagnosed with leukemia. My parents had to focus on taking him to the hospital and caring for him, and my attention was primarily devoted to getting myself to and from school on time. I did not have parental supervision to ensure I completed homework or read books outside of class, and because I was so young, I did not complete some big projects I was assigned. So I would say here I can emphasize this a little bit more, but I devoted to getting myself to and from school on time rather than paying attention in class. And then here I'm talking about my teachers tried to help, but with all the other students in the class were unable to parent me, so my grades suffered during that time. And then I actually want to emphasize it was not the teacher's fault that this happened. So really just emphasizing the main point here. As a result, it's clear that sometimes teachers can make a big effort, but their students' performance is still out of their control. In addition, academic performance can be very difficult to measure. In the education field, there has been extensive debate about how to measure student improvement, whether students should be compared to an expected standard for their grade/age level, or whether their improvement over the course of the year is more important. This problem has not been solved, and it's difficult to imagine that a school district could come up with a good compromise that all teachers would be happy with. All right, so that ding 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 sorry, the alarm sound for my timer is not on, but that is 30 minutes, so I will stop there, even though I spent a bit of time talking about my thought process with all of you. So as you can see, a lot of what I tried to do is really come up with a strong argument here, and I have an example based on my personal experience, but I also have an example tied to Harry Potter or anything else that you can think of. So if you know any of those series from when you were younger, you can certainly draw on those as well. Here, my second body paragraph, I did a little bit of the same thing. So the examples here that I pointed to, you can see were less specific, but definitely still things that I could explain and really point to more specifically. Here, my concession paragraph, I addressed 2 different examples because that is what the specific prompt here asked of me. And as you can see, a lot of my other skills, like being able to write a little bit faster and being able to type quickly, these are really underrated skills when you are thinking about improving at the essay. So I will keep doing this. I will try to stick with 30 essays in 30 days, but if not, I will definitely get at least the full 30 essays in 30 days or not. So please do let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, I will be reading all the comments. Thank you so much. More information on how you can actually implement these tips and tricks into getting a better score on your GRE, please visit AliceChenGRE.com. I have more information about what it's like to work with me. For example, that I was patient and kind, I explained things to Sarah thoroughly and offered examples and tips. With Joshua, I gave him a better understanding of what he should work on to get over that 150 score that he was aiming for. I have more information about how private GRE tutoring works with me. For example, you can choose between writing, quantitative, and or the verbal section. I will give you a customized study plan with session agendas for each time we meet. I can provide sample questions, different study resources, do a content review, go over strategies and examples with you, and as always, I offer flexible payment and scheduling options. Thanks so much for watching!